the Business Finance Podcast, navigating the funding maze. As non-bank lenders are playing an increasingly important role in financing Irish SMEs, alternative business finance brokers have created this podcast to update SMEs about the ever-evolving and complex business finance market.
I'm Carl Fitzpatrick and welcome to the first episode of the Business Finance Podcast. Tony Ennis is a director of alternative business finance brokers and he joins me now to provide an overview of the business finance market here in Ireland. Tony, how has the funding landscape changed over the past decade?
Well, Carl, it's changed quite significantly. The reasons for that are probably there's a number of key drivers. So we'll take the global financial crisis that we all remember, obviously, Brexit and the length of time that we were in the negotiations on that, and then the eventual outcomes. And more recently, of course, there's the COVID-19 pandemic, which has seriously affected businesses and obviously lenders and funders because we were all in that together. As a result of that, and during the same period of time, to address funding issues, there was an increase in the number of new sources of finance available from alternative providers. The end result of all of that is that there are now more players in the funding market. So that has reduced the dominance of the traditional pillar banks. And it's also meant that those lenders have entered the market with new product offerings. So we've gone from 13 functioning banks to just 3 in 2022. The number of very active non-bank lenders has increased from 2 to 22. And they've loaned over 50 million each in the period 2019-2020. It's important to say they can often execute quickly and be very flexible on the finance facility structure, something that traditional banks may struggle with due to regulatory and risk restraints. So there's a large range of debt and private equity providers now in the market, which didn't exist here a decade ago. And this can only be good for business because it brings in competition, it brings in innovation, and it brings in new product offerings. The key challenge is for SMEs to be aware of them and know what these new offerings are.
And Tony, what can you tell us about SMEs' appetite for funding as we emerge from the pandemic?
Well, during the pandemic, 17,651 SMEs here in Ireland borrowed 1.65 billion through SBCI schemes alone. As we're now emerging from the pandemic, and remember the central bank here has predicted strong growth in the Irish economy, then this has given business a lot of confidence, many of which have ambitious plans to grow their business over the years ahead. And funding, like always, is a key ingredient in achieving this. And I'd also add that recent initiatives by the government in terms of expansion of healthcare, of housing, and the big one is climate change. This is going to have an impact in every sector of the Irish economy. And that in turn is going to lead to massive opportunities for Irish SMEs to be able to supply and deliver on a lot of the output of those initiatives. If I take it out of Ireland for a minute, a recent survey by the Bank of England stated that 36% of SMEs in the UK make use of external finance. Incredibly, 52% of SMEs consider only one provider when seeking a loan. And 25% of SMEs are put off from shopping around by the hassle or the time it takes. The more products are in a market, the more providers are in a market, the more complex that market becomes. And really, for a business who needs finance at particular points on its journey, the business owner or the finance manager couldn't possibly be in a position to be able to monitor this. I think that what I've just mentioned confirms the urgent need for a broker in the market. So somebody who knows that market intimately, who knows the needs, who knows the sectoral trends, importantly also knows the products on the other side. And I think that approach, the broker approach in the marketplace, I think takes away the hassle from the business owners in the exact same way, because business owners are well used to this, the brokerage model, in the insurance industry. And they've worked that system very extensively over a long number of years. So it's no difference, except this is about a brokerage in the business finance space exclusively.
And Tony, with the increased number of non-bank lenders operating in the Irish market, has there been a shift in how lenders evaluate finance applications?
Oh, definitely, Carl. Yeah, there's been a sea change in the approach taken by many of the lenders. I'll just give a couple of examples. They're very interested in the people behind the business. The management team is a critical component in their decision-making process. They look favourably on businesses that are very well run from an operational perspective, and then they like to see the use of the latest technology and robust financial reporting systems. Of course, the ability of the business to be able to predict sales and cash flow into the future, whether that's near to midterm, is also very useful. But the key bit is each application is reviewed on its own merits, and non-bank lenders do not apply a one-size-fits-all approach. They have the flexibility to tailor products, and they price the finance based on the level of risk involved. So that's a more tailored package to the individual SME.
And Tony, what can you tell us about these non-bank lenders?
There's a lot of misunderstanding about the term non-bank lender. So maybe the simplest way to say it is a non-bank lender is a financial provider that is not a bank. But that all that actually means is that since they aren't a deposit-taking institution like the banks, their loans are not funded by customer deposits. They're usually specialists in a particular sector or a particular range of financial products, and they price based on the perceived risk. They originate from all over the world. The largest lenders operating in Ireland currently would have originally been operating their businesses in Britain and America. But some of the providers also originate in Europe, Asia and Australia. It's also important to say that a few of the lenders are of Irish origin and are funded through a variety of national and international sources. They both compete, and this is important to state, they also complement the banks, and their most popular products are asset finance, leasing, invoice discounting and property finance. But there are a range of other products that are constantly being introduced into the Irish market. So they're very good at developing products for particular sectors or for particular sizes of businesses like SMEs. Their presence here is very much encouraged by the Irish government and the central bank to ensure that there's competition, and a lot of competition, in the market and with a choice of products available to Irish businesses. This is evidenced by the inclusion of non-bank lenders in the rollout of the SBCI funding to Irish businesses, where they were introduced both in terms of dealing with and helping support on COVID, the effects of Brexit, and now with aiding business recovery in the Irish market.
And Tony, from an international perspective, how prevalent are non-bank lenders in other countries?
Oh, very prevalent, Carl. So if we think about it here in Ireland, it's a relatively new phenomenon, but this follows an already well-established trend that you will find strong evidence for in the USA, in the United Kingdom, where borrowing from non-traditional lenders is seen as the norm. In fact, it's quite typical for businesses to diversify their lending, to borrow from a range of different sources and across different products. And if you think about it from a business point of view, and particularly from an SME perspective, that has a lot of advantages in terms of spreading the funding requirement with products that are specifically designed to meet a particular need that the business has. In the UK, non-bank lenders have approximately a 36% market share in SME lending. Ireland has a long way to travel still in this regard to catch up, but I expect that its mass market adoption will be accelerated over the coming years quite considerably.
Tony, you mentioned earlier that non-bank lenders don't accept deposits. So how are they funded?
So these non-bank lenders seek funding from the wholesale capital markets, where efficient financing opportunities exist from global institutional investors. Here in Ireland, they also access funding from both the SBCI and the Ireland Strategic Investment Fund.
And Tony, of course, non-bank lenders are not a new feature in the Irish market, but talk to us about their increased presence in the market over the past decade.
So over the past decade, we've gone from 2 to 63 non-bank lenders operating in the Irish market. And it is important to state that number continues to grow every year. Importantly, 22 of these lenders loaned in excess of 50 million each between 2019 and 2020. And again, just to mention the SBCI, since 2015, the SBCI has delivered 2.8 billion in funding facilities to 46,000 SMEs through 35 finance partners.
And Tony, what benefits do non-bank lenders bring to the Irish market?
These providers are more flexible in their approach and in general have less conditions applying to the loans than banks do. They offer a greater range of options which are more appropriate to the needs of Irish SMEs. They can offer more competitive terms as they have significantly lower overheads, no branch networks, and appropriate staffing levels. They provide improved accessibility to finance for many Irish SMEs and offer, and this is important, much faster decisions.
So how does their risk profile differ from that of banks?
Because many of them specialise, so they will either operate in particular sectors, in particular sizes of businesses, or they will have some other determinant. So the advantage of that is they have deep-rooted knowledge of how the sectors operate. As a result, they have more of a risk appetite than banks typically do. They're not as restricted from a regulatory perspective, and as they price risk at an individual enterprise level, the lower the risk, the lower the interest rate. The application process is also more streamlined than that of the banks. Because they're smaller organisations, the decision-making process is much faster, and this also flows through to drawing down the funds, which is exactly what Irish SMEs want and need.
And Tony, what size is the business finance market here in Ireland?
At the end of 2020, SMEs owed banks 20 billion, while non-bank lenders were owed over 4 billion in the Irish market. So non-bank lenders currently have approximately 17% of the marketplace. Compare that, Carl, to the UK. Non-bank lenders have approximately a 36% market share in SME lending. Interestingly, in the UK, 70% of the non-bank lending business is sourced from business finance brokers.
And as companies grow, Tony, how do their financing needs change?
So if we take the journey that businesses go on, at the startup phase, typically they're funded through a mix of the entrepreneur's own resources, friends and family, grant agencies like local enterprise offices, local leader companies, other supports available through government, peer-to-peer lending, Microfinance Ireland, which many micros will now have become accustomed to as a result of welcome interventions introduced by the government, and business angels. If we move forward a little bit through the early growth phase, they would quite often rely on a variety of funding through Enterprise Ireland, for example, invoice discounting, asset finance, inventory finance, export credit, and venture capital. And then as they move further on and they experience sustained growth, they would then consider private equity or private debt placement, etc. So that's a typical landscape for enterprises in Ireland.
And what sectors specifically are non-bank lenders most active in?
Well, each of the non-bank lenders have a sectoral specialisation, which means that the importance of the non-bank lenders for each sector varies significantly. Currently, non-bank lenders are most active in property, motor trade, wholesale, retail, recruitment, manufacturing, haulage, and construction. But again, I need to stress that this is expanding all the time. The number of non-bank lenders has expanded rapidly here, and therefore the range of finance products that they provide for MSMEs are constantly expanding, as are the sectors that they're serving. So if I wanted to give my own opinion on this one, every business sector in Ireland should seriously consider their offerings, seek independent advice, and make informed funding choices for their own business after that. And I would stress, in particular, SMEs should be doing this as a matter of course moving forward.
And Tony, in your opinion, what does the future of business finance look like here in Ireland?
At a higher level, with the emergence of open banking, fintech companies are leveraging technologies like artificial intelligence and automated underwriting to create flexible solutions. Many are also investing in machine learning to revolutionize the lending process. Previously, SMEs would have to wait weeks or even months. Most businesses know this to receive a decision on their funding request. But thanks to new technology, this decision now can be made in minutes rather than days, or days rather than months. With compelling digital-first propositions, it is these kind of lenders, alongside of the incumbent leading alternative finance players, that will continue to drive the revolution in SME lending. In the UK market, Amazon and PayPal are now lending to SMEs. Going forward, we need the fintech sector here in Ireland not to be seen as the cool kid on the block, but properly recognised as playing a critical role in the business finance market. So it's about making sure innovation is not being stifled, and instead, innovation is encouraged to prosper. I think it's critical to recognise the growing frustration being felt by Irish businesses, because the personal relationship between the business and its bank has become, or is becoming, a thing of the past. If you talk to any grouping of business owners, particularly SMEs, they'll tell you that it's increasingly difficult to deal with a person who has taken the time to gain a meaningful understanding of their business and how it works, and who also has the ability to make or influence a timely funding decision. So yes, Carl, the future is for SMEs to gain knowledge on the vast range of funding opportunities now available to them, and that's only going to increase in the years ahead. We are going to continue to have more funders of varying types in the Irish marketplace. Those funders will continue to embrace innovative technology to enhance their offering to business customers. And finally, it has never been, as far as I'm concerned, as important for business owners and managers to have access to finance professionals that really understand the current business finance ecosystem and who, very importantly, can guide them through the funding processes and beyond, and that the same professionals can be a source of information at the time of the funding requirement and into the future, so that the business owner, the SME, always has up-to-date knowledge available to them.
Well, I'm Carl Fitzpatrick and that was Tony Ennis, and we'd like to thank you for listening to the Business Finance Podcast. For more information, you can visit alternativefinance.ie, and I do hope that you can join us next time.
The Business Finance Podcast, navigating the funding maze. As non-bank lenders are playing an increasingly important role in financing Irish SMEs, alternative business finance brokers have created this podcast to update SMEs about the ever-evolving and complex business finance market.